September 27, 1933. Bialetti patented the first Moka Express that changed the world of coffee.
Con la caffettiera Moka Express.
Quella che usiamo anche noi, con la caffettiera Moka Express.
Un espresso meglio che al bar.
Caffettiera Moka Express.
Contrary to what the ad might says, this brewer did not produce an actual espresso coffee. An espresso machine in the cafes uses around 9 bars of pressure, but this moka pot only uses 1 to 2 bars of pressure to make a similar shot of espresso. But just because you could make a coffee at home, they became very popular. And now, after more than 90 years from this moment, making coffee at home came a long way. Some people use fresh coffee beans, roasters, grinders, and shiny espresso machines. Others use tiny capsules moving at insanely high speeds to get a perfectly calculated shot of coffee. But if you leave out all the fancy coffee aficionados, around 500 million people still use this for their morning coffee. Bialetti Moka Express. It's old, it's simple, and yet it's still here. Which makes you think, if the world moved on to newer, faster, and more high-tech machines, why is this aluminum pot still used by so many? As a designer, I always come back to one thing. Maybe it's the design. But then, why this design? Why it has this sharp, geometric, octagonal shape? Why hasn't this changed in nearly a century? And if it's not design, if an octagonal shape alone can't shape the morning routine of 500 million people, then what did? To answer all this question, we have to go back in time and understand how coffee was democratized. Alright, picture Italy in the early 1900s. Coffee was not something you just made at home. You had to actually go somewhere for it. The people would get dressed up, walk to a bar, and watch this massive crow machine put on a show just to make their coffee. To operate these machines, you needed a high pressure of 9 bars and a trained barista to work on them. And on top of that, these machines were insanely expensive, more than what most families made in an entire month. So coffee was this production. It was fancy. It definitely was not something that you did at home. Then came this guy, Alfonso Bialetti. He was just a regular metal worker from this tiny town called Crucinello. He had worked in aluminum factories in France for a while, and then he came back home to open up this little foundry making basic stuff like pots and pans. Nothing crazy. But one day, he saw his wife doing laundry with this device called Lissy Voice. It was a basic boiler that pushed hot soapy water up a tube and let it drip back down over the clothes. Watching that, he thought, what if coffee could work the same way? So he teamed up with an engineer named Luigi Di Ponte. And Di Ponte came up with this 3-part aluminium pot with an octagonal shape. At that time, he was not thinking about the design language or anything fancy. He gave it 8 flat sides just because that shape it was easier to pull the part out of the mold and helped it cool faster. And then on September 27, 1933, they filed the first patent. The Moka Express was born. Its timing was perfect because at that time, Mussolini's government in Italy was pushing everyone to use aluminium because steel was hard to get. Aluminium on the other side was cheap. It was light and it had that shiny modern industrial look that people wanted. So Alfonso started casting them with aluminium in sand molds right from his own workshop. He sold about 70,000 units in the first 10 years. Not bad for a product at that time without Amazon. But then everything changed.
A state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
World War II happened and production stopped. Everything shut down till the war ended.
the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations. The flags of freedom fly all over Europe.
Then in 1946, Alfonso's son Renato came back from war with one goal: to turn his dad's little aluminium pot into something that every Italian family owns. Before we get into how Renato turned this into a global phenomenon, let's actually break down what makes this design so genius. Because when you really look at this thing is like a masterclass in industrial design. The whole thing is just three parts, that's it. Bottom chamber that holds the water, middle funnel that holds the coffee, and the top chamber that collects the brewed coffee. And the way it actually works is also very simple. As the water heats up, it creates steam pressure, about 1 to 2 bars. And that pressure pushes the hot water up through the coffee grounds and into the top chamber. No electricity, no moving parts, just heat and pressure doing their thing. And if you look at the bottom of this boiler chamber, it has that iconic octagonal shape with these 8 flat tapered sides to make the manufacturing easier. As I said before, usually these are casted from molten aluminium, which is poured into molds. So if you made it a perfect cylinder, it would get stuck in the mold. But because of those 8 angled faces, it pops out easily. Also, those edges give you way better grip when you're holding the pot, especially when it's hot or your hands are wet. And this is the safety valve, probably the most important part you'll never really notice. It's usually rated just under 2 bars of pressure, and if something clogs or goes wrong, it vents the steam before the whole thing explodes in your kitchen. On the top of the bottom chamber, there are these male threads that screws to the top chamber. Also, there is a small lip inside that holds the funnel filter. The funnel is made from aluminium sheet which is blanked into a cup and then drawn to get this funnel shape. Inside the funnel, there is this perforated metal disc. And this one part does 2 things. It lets the pressurized water rise up through the coffee, and it keeps the coffee grounds from falling into the water below. And now, this top compartment is the collector. It has the same octagonal shape for visual symmetry. But inside, there's this hollow stream tower. This is where the magic happens. As pressure builds up, the water shoots up through the coffee, rise through the stem, and exit through these 2 small side ports at the top. And once it starts gurgling, you know it's done. So no timers, no alarms, just listen for the sound. And if you flip it upside down, you got a second perforated filter pressed against the rubber gasket. This creates a seal between the top and the bottom part when you screw them together. And this sheet acts as a final barrier to keep any tiny coffee grounds from ending up in the top compartment. And finally, this knob on the top and handle on the side both are made from bakelite, one of the first industrial plastic. It doesn't conduct heat, it's tough, and it keeps your fingers safe when you're picking up a fresh steaming moka pot off the burner. So every single part here was designed with manufacturing, safety, and user experience in the mind. And that's probably why after almost 90 years, nobody's really tried to improve the design. Because when you nail the fundamentals this hard, what's left to fix? Like I said, good design alone doesn't make something iconic. Alfonso sold only 70,000 units of these in 10 years, which is decent, but not world-changing. For that, you need what happened next. So 1946 rolls around, and Renato Bialetti comes back from being a prisoner of war with this wild idea to put his dad's aluminium pot in every Italian kitchen. But how do you take something that's selling okay and turn it into a cultural phenomenon? One word: advertising. The first thing Renato did was something his dad never thought of. He hired advertisers. Real one. And they came up with this genius campaign and created this cartoon mascot called the Omino coi baffi, which means the little man with the mustache. And this guy was not just some random character. He looked like a typical Italian man with a mustache. Or we can also say that this character was based on Renato himself. And he was pointing up at the coffee pot like he's saying, "One coffee please." I truly believe that these mascots are a great way of making a brand instantly recognizable. But for some reasons, no one is doing it nowadays. Anyways, after the mascot, then he started advertising on TV. He created these animated ads with the mascot and showed Italian families making coffee together in their kitchens. And then he came up with this famous slogan,
Un espresso meglio che al bar.
which means espresso at home, just like at the cafe. This line opened that coffee ritual for everyone, especially women. The coffee at home gave women access to the coffee ritual that had previously been barred to them. So they launched special campaigns empowering women. Like here, it says, "Signora, tagli I legami vecchi sistemi," which means, "Lady, cut ties with the old system and update your household with the fastest, most modern, economical coffee maker. And you will have an espresso at home just like at the bar." So overall, they were not trying to compete with the cafes. They were trying to bring the cafe experience at home. Because no one can compete with the cafes in Italy. We saw it again with Starbucks. Now on the product side, he didn't change too much. He kept the octagonal shape, he kept the aluminium, and he kept the essential 3 components. But he standardized the design so that he can scale up production and pump out millions of units per year. And by the 1960s, the Moka Express was not just a product anymore. It had become part of Italian identity. Every morning, millions of Italians would wake up to the same ritual: fill the bottom with water, add coffee to the funnel, and screw it together to put it on the stove, and wait for the distinctive gurgling sound. And when something becomes that embedded in culture, competitors notice. So other companies started making their own versions. They experimented with different shapes, square ones, perfectly round ones, some with decorative patterns. They also tried stainless steel, different colors, and electric versions. The market was flooded with the Moka pot variations. But here's where Bialetti's strategy really paid off. While competitors were trying to reinvent the wheel, Bialetti stayed true to its identity. That octagonal shape was now iconic. People didn't just wanted a Moka pot, they wanted the Moka pot. So instead of changing the design, they expanded it smartly. New sizes for different households, limited edition colors, special finishes, but always that same octagonal silhouette. And then, in 1979, Milan's Trinale Design Museum added it to their permanent collection. The same place that showcases Italy's greatest design achievements. And then, in 1988, Museum of Modern Arts in New York did the same thing. A coffee maker hanging alongside Picasso and Van Gogh. They called it a perfect example of Italian design. When a product ends up in art museums, you have transcended function. 90 years later, the coffee technology has exploded. $1,000 machines, perfect extraction pods, app-controlled brewing. But if you walk into any Italian kitchen, there is still that same octagonal aluminium pot on the stove. So why did this thing survive 90 years? Why does 500 million people still uses it when we have espresso machines, pot system, and all this fancy stuff? I think it comes down to 3 things. First, the simplicity. It just works. No electricity, no filters, no software updates. You put water in, coffee in, put some heat under it, and you get coffee every time. Second, it's democratic. A $20 mocha pot makes coffee that's 80% as good as a $2,000 espresso machine. And that's incredible value. And it also means that everyone can access this ritual, not just the people who can afford fancy equipments. But third is the most important factor. It shaped coffee culture instead of just following it. The Moka pot didn't just give people coffee at home, it gave them a coffee ritual at home. That slow process of listening for the gurgling, the smell filling the kitchen, the anticipation, that became part of how people think about coffee. But here's the irony, that same robustness that made it so iconic also became its business problem. When something doesn't break and doesn't need upgrading, people don't buy it again. And that's exactly what happened to Bialetti. A company that made the world's most durable coffee maker eventually struggled because, well, their product was too good. And that's the reason Bialetti was bought by a Chinese investment firm just to stay alive. So, the very thing that made it legendary, lasting forever, also made it hard to sustain as a business. So, yeah, it's not just an aluminium pot, it's a piece of industrial design history that quietly changed how the world started its day. In a world obsessed with upgrades, the Mocha reminds us that some things just need to last. And maybe that's the real genius behind it. Not that it makes a great coffee, but that it makes you feel like you're home. That's all for today. I'll see you in the next one.